The Tale of Jane and Will, A Love Beyond Fate. Long ago, in a quiet village of medieval Europe, there lived a nobleman's daughter named Jane. Unlike many girls of her time, Jane loved books more than jewels and longed to study in the great cities where scholars gathered. Her father, however, refused. "The world beyond our village is dangerous," he said, "especially for a young lady traveling alone." But Jane's determination was stronger than her father's fear. At last she persuaded him with an unusual plan. She would travel disguised as a young man. Reluctantly, her father agreed. And so Jane cut her hair short, dressed in a traveler's cloak, and took a new name, Mike. After several days of travel, Jane reached the outskirts of a bustling city. But a violent storm had swept through the land. A small stream had swollen into a rushing river, blocking the road. Jane stood helpless at the bank, unsure how to cross. At that moment, a tall young traveler approached. His name was Will. Seeing the hesitant boy, he smiled kindly. "Hop on my back," he said. "The water is strong today." Before Jane could protest, Will carried her across the roaring water. She clung to his shoulders, her face burning with embarrassment, yet she dared not reveal the truth. "Thank you," she said softly. "My name is Mike." From that day forward, their friendship began. They soon discovered they were both seeking education and enrolled in the same boarding school. By coincidence, or perhaps fate, they became roommates. Jane was always careful. She never changed clothes when Will was nearby and often invented excuses to step outside. Will sometimes found this strange, but he never questioned it. Instead, the two young men became inseparable. They studied together, laughed together, and supported one another through the difficult years of learning. To Will, Mike became the closest friend he had ever known. To Jane, he became something far more. Years passed, and the day of graduation arrived. At the great gate of the school, the two friends prepared to part ways. Jane's heart pounded. She tried to hint at the truth. "There is something you should know," she said quietly. "If someday you learn that Mike is not who you think, would you still remember him?" Will laughed and gripped her shoulders. "Of course. You are my best brother. I may never meet another friend like you." Jane's final words trembled on her lips. If Mike were a woman and loved you deeply. But Will misunderstood entirely. He simply sighed and said, "It is a pity we may never see each other again." And so they parted. Jane returned to her noble family. Will returned to poverty. Will's family was poor, and his days were filled with hard labor. Yet in quiet moments, he always thought of Mike. The thought troubled him. Why did he miss his friend so deeply? Why did his heart ache? At times he feared something was wrong with him. He even despised himself for feelings he could not explain. Then one day, a letter arrived. It was from Mike. Inside the letter, Jane revealed everything. She was a woman. Her true name was Jane, and she loved him. Will stared at the letter for a long time before suddenly leaping to his feet. At last he understood. Without hesitation, he said farewell to his mother and set off to Jane's hometown, determined to ask for her hand in marriage. But fate had other plans. On the road, Will encountered a local magistrate named Smith, who was being attacked by a wild bear during a hunt. Without thinking, Will rushed forward and fought the beast, saving the official's life. Wounded but victorious, Will continued his journey. When he finally arrived at Jane's house, misfortune struck again. Jane had gone to visit her aunt. Her father looked down upon the poor young traveler. Coldly, he told Will a lie. Jane has already married a wealthy nobleman. The words crushed him. Heartbroken, Will left without saying another word. Soon after, men sent by the magistrate Smith found Will. Smith, still recovering from his injuries, wished to repay the young man who had saved him. He offered Will a position helping to manage the region. Will accepted. Over the next year, his intelligence and honesty transformed the land. Roads were repaired, farms prospered, and justice was restored. Before his death, Smith made a final decision. He named Will his successor. The poor laborer had become the new magistrate. Meanwhile, Jane waited. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. But Will never came. She eventually heard that the old magistrate Smith had died and a new magistrate named Will had taken his place. She assumed it must be someone else. Surely Will would have come for her. Under pressure from her parents, Jane reluctantly agreed to marry a wealthy nobleman. But she had a secret plan. On the journey to her future husband's home, she disguised herself again as a young man, intending to escape and travel to Will's village. Far away, Will ruled wisely, but lived with constant sorrow. He never stopped thinking of Jane. He worked tirelessly, too tirelessly. He built roads, bridges, and irrigation canals, earning praise from the royal court. But his body could not endure the endless labor and the weight of regret. Eventually, he fell gravely ill. Before dying, he wrote one final message to Jane, a confession of his love and sorrow. Then he passed away. On the night Jane attempted her escape, a terrible tornado swept across the land. She sought shelter near an old graveyard. While waiting for the storm to pass, she noticed a newly carved gravestone. The name upon it froze her heart. Will. Beneath his name were words carved from his final letter. Jane, my beloved, if fate had been kinder, I would have come for you. In this life I failed you, but my heart will wait for you in the next. Jane collapsed in grief beside the grave. Thunder roared across the sky. Then, in a blinding flash of lightning, the earth split open and the grave cracked apart. For a moment, Jane felt as if she saw Will reaching out to her from another world. Without hesitation, she leapt into the broken grave. The storm raged through the night. Floodwaters from the rain washed across the cemetery, leveling the ground. When morning came, villagers arrived to see the damage. The grave was gone, but beside a great tree nearby, they saw something strange. Perched on a branch were two beautiful lovebirds sitting close together, singing softly to the rising sun. And from that day on, the villagers said, "Some loves are stronger than fate itself."